Hey everyone, this is my submission for Major Writing Assignment 4. For this project, I went through my process portfolios throughout the year to answer a question I've reconsidered throughout the course of the semester. What is the fine definition of literacy? At the start of the semester, my interpretation of literacy was set in stone. As in week 1, I defined literacy as the ability to read and write. And while that's partially true, I've come to find that literacy is a lot more than just words on a paper. Literacy is a broad spectrum that can never truly be mastered. Though there are some people who have more knowledge and experience with reading and writing, the writing process is actually just a cycle of discovery through your drafts and peer reviews. This is seen when looking back at my first major writing assignment draft, where I had to talk about what I learned about the definition of literacy through reading the first chapter. Unsurprisingly, this was not the best paper I've ever written, from formatting issues like not indenting my paragraphs for some reason, to lots and lots of grammatical errors. Needless to say, I wasn't being compared to Shakespeare. It was kind of a shitty first draft. You see what I did there? Shitty First Drafts is an essay by Anne Lamott in Chapter 4 of Writing About Writing and talks about the limitations of perfectionism in students. In this essay, Lamott argues that no one, not even professional writers, write perfect drafts on their first try. She mentions the misconceptions that the best writers have perfect drafts on their first try, which isn't true. She later explains how good writers write messy, terrible first drafts just to get the thoughts out of their head and onto paper. Lamott labels this as the down draft, where you just spew your words onto paper without really second guessing anything. This gives you a base to do your next step, which she describes as the updraft. Here, you fix up and start to put your jumbled words into actual coherent sentences. This leads you to the final draft, which she calls the dental draft. She calls it the dental draft because you're checking every tooth of your argument at this state. You polish it up and then click submit. In the past, I really didn't think about first drafts, let alone a second. I was very selective with my words, leading my high school essays to be pretty bland and not really contain any of my true thoughts. Through reading this essay, I realized that all of my high school essays kind of sucked, and if I had actually used her 3-step process, maybe I could have written slightly better essays. Learning this really early in college, though, definitely helped spark a lot of my writings on assignments, including my process portfolios going onward and even most assignments in other classes. Revising my first draft on my assignments helped me not only become a better writer in my opinion, but boosted my grades. It even led to me getting a good grade on my next major writing assignment. In major writing assignment 2, the assignment asked you to write an essay revolving around your past experiences and how those experiences shaped you as a writer. More specifically, the literacy sponsors that helped you along the way. Literacy sponsors, as defined by Deborah Brandt in her essay Sponsors of Literacy, are any agents, local or distant, concrete or abstract, who enable, support, teach, model, as well as recruit, regulate, suppress, or withhold literacy. In simple terms, a sponsor is anyone who helped you learn to read or write because they got something out of it. This involves parents, teachers, Google, etc. The thing I liked about this essay, even though I was taking information from the book, I was relating it to my real life experiences. I connected the book to my life by explaining who my literacy sponsors were and how they helped me progress my literacy. This essay was overall a little better than the last one, mainly because I was using strategies that I originally learned from Lamott to write it. The first draft was horrible, of course, but my final draft actually ended up being pretty solid. Peer review was one of the most important parts of writing in my opinion, as you got to see how it sounds from an outsider perspective. And while we're on the topic of drafts, let's switch topics to my last major writing assignment, as I had 3 drafts on that one. Besides this one, of course, major writing assignment 3 was my final major writing assignment of the semester. In this essay, I dove into topics discussed in Reflections on the Concept of a Discourse Community by John Swales, and Identity, Authority, and Learning to Write in New Workplaces by Elizabeth Wardle. In these essays, there are 2 majorly important words: discourse communities and authority. Discourse communities, as explained by Swales, are groups that have goals and purposes and use communication to achieve their goals. This could be literally any group of people who share a goal and have a certain lingo or the way they talk. For instance, in my essay, I talked about my family, friends, and even the people in my major. We all have some sort of lingo and all share a common goal of some sort. Authority, as defined by Wardle, well, I'm not reading her sophisticated ass definition, but it's essentially a social status inside of a community that dictates where you rank as far as reputation in the community. You can't just take authority in a group, you have to earn it. Connecting this to my real life, I mentioned how authority dictated my personal discourse communities. For example, in my family, my parents' words would carry the most weight. In my major, my teachers' words would carry the most weight. My friend group was a little different. There wasn't exactly a large difference in the authority per se, but there was more weight under certain individuals' words. Submitting this assignment was a little different though, as I had a peer review and a teacher reviewed version of this paper. This was by far my best paper, and I think it was due to the extra revision it got. Going on from my major writing assignments and talking about my weekly process portfolios, every Sunday one of these were due, and they would usually revolve around essays from the book. For example, on page 38, the concept of genre systems were introduced, and my week 2 process portfolios used real life examples, like the difference in tone and professionalism between talking to a friend and in a job interview. In the week 5 process portfolio, I talked talked about the concept of code meshing and code switching, introduced by Vershawn Ashanti Youngs, Should Writers Use Their Own English, by voicing my own opinions on when code meshing should and shouldn't be appropriate. Week 8, I talked about my experiences with discourse communities. You get the point. As I'd read through the book, I'd relate it back to my life and really dissect what the author meant in their essay. To wrap up everything, writing about writing actually taught me a lot of valuable lessons about literacy. Going onwards, every paper I write will have multiple drafts because I realized my writing improved quite substantially when I had multiple revisions, especially when they were peer-reviewed because it gave me another perspective on my paper. As the book mentions, writers aren't perfect, but I personally believe this book led me to write to the best of my abilities thus far. Thank you for watching.